Here. Pugh,
Present.
Rodriguez, Rogers, Sexton,
Here.
Sullard, Thorsland,
Here.
Benich Theranot, Votava,
Here.
Wiggs,
Here.
Wilson, Cagle,
Here.
Carter, Cowart, Crane, Esri,
Here.
Barney,
Here.
Fava,
Here.
Furtado, Greer, Locke.
Here. Well, Ms. Rogers just walked in, and she rocked in. I cannot speak, but that is all the better for you, Ms. Rogers. I'd entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda. So moved Sexton and Thorsland second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda has been approved. I have no slips for public input. Everybody here is an invited guest. So that closes public input, and we'll begin our budget presentations with a short intro from Travis.
So first up will be the coroner. But before she starts, I just want to point out one thing on the slides that didn't apply yesterday. There's two different colors. Green slides are for the general fund, black slides are for non-general fund. Okay, so now we can go ahead and hop into the coroner's presentation.
Come on up, Lori.
There. Are we good? Okay. Not really sure where I'm supposed to start. Do you ask questions or do I tell you what I'm doing? Just go fast? Okay. So I tried to submit my budget to be transparent with the funds that I actually needed in the line items that they actually belonged in. That was denied. So I'll talk about the two big things that I feel like we need for the office. Professional services, which includes autopsies, histology, x-rays, and unclaimed cremations, of which we're already at 12 for the year. The professional services budget, we're underfunded for 2025. I really feel strongly that that needs to be fixed so that the community knows exactly how much that we need for this. For example, I put in the budget amendment in May. It didn't get approved till last week. Still haven't been able to pay my July bills for autopsies. So next week is September. So hopefully that money will come through so I can pay for August. The other thing that we have is our staffing. I'll continue talking about staffing until we get better staffed. We are currently at 5 full-time people. At the recommendation of the county board, I did the research and I looked into the other counties and came up with the number of 12 is what we should have. So I asked for 8 additional people, 7 for investigations and 1 if we are going to pursue a pathologist, we have to have a full-time autopsy assistant. And that's where those funds come. And that's all I have.
Other questions for our coroner? Ms. Lakshan.
What is the status these days on the likelihood of a full-time pathologist in Champaign County?
So when I looked at the recruiting that they had done before, they had 6 people that were interested in coming here. One had just kind of called the recruiting office a couple months before. So I reached out to her and we had a lengthy conversation. I met with county administration about her. She talked about coming out for a week in October. I said that would be great if I have an autopsy assistant and we could renovate the autopsy suite. Neither of those happened, so she's not coming out in October to work for a week. She's going to come out and talk to me though.
Further questions? Mr. Thorsland?
I see you have not a very large line for state grant revenue, and that's all from the state generally?
I don't know what
Okay.
that is.
Have you seen, what I've seen is a trend through almost everyone's presentation, the quote, the uncertainty of federal funds. And I don't know how much of what you get is passed through the state from federal funds, if any. And I think we're going to continue to see that uncertainty, and I don't know how anybody in any of the departments is making a budget when they don't know if they have any federal grants. What in the world's going on? Because the people doing them don't have any clue what in the world they do. So
I've met with the grant coordinator once or twice, I think, but I haven't
Okay.
heard anything.
all right, thanks.
One thing that I'd like to note about the professional services line is, yes, 160,000 is not enough to complete the autopsies out of county. I know that last year we had budgeted it there in hopes of attracting a pathologist here. So if going forward, if we would budget 160,000 for next year, we would just be at some point in the middle of the year again.
It hit us about June,
Yeah.
so half the month.
Yeah.
Or half the year.
Yeah, when things get kind of crazy out in the community, that's when, yeah. So I would like, I'm one person on this 22-person board, I would like to see the professional services number higher because we know 160 is shockingly low when an autopsy costs about $2,000. And we need to do them. And we're not making money by doing other counties. Are there other questions? Mr. Pugh?
Yes, you've asked us for another position before, correct? And you still need that, right?
I'm asking for 8 in this, 8 positions.
8 additional? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Carney?
You mentioned in your opening that renovating or remodeling the autopsy suite. What's the story there? I didn't know there was work that needed to be done there.
The room wasn't built to do autopsies. So there are wooden cabinets in there and floor that was not sustainable being moist all the time. So that was the common comment made by all of the people that were interested in coming out to work, was that our facility needed some updating. I don't think it would cost that much taking the cabinets out, putting in some metal shelving, but it did need to be done. And the flooring.
I will also just add to that, because I've toured it with you. County Executive Summers and I toured with our coroner, and we looked around and we put together a plan, and then we lost our facilities director, and I think that's part of what happened, because we've even appropriated $30,000 towards that. It's very disappointing and highly frustrating. So I
Agreed.
To the extent I have, I apologize. Ms. Lakshan.
There's another question about the autopsy assistant and the need for having one to attract, you say, a pathologist. What is the role of I guess I'm trying to make my brain understand. For me, if we're not doing autopsies in Champaign County, what would the autopsy assistant be doing? Like, if we don't have a pathologist yet, is that more of like a managerial
go
role,
together.
or-
Yeah.
Okay.
But we'd need to have someone that is trained and get them in there to do
Right.
that. But there's plenty of work to be done.
Okay.
In the past, there hasn't been anyone like overseeing the autopsy area. And so that's kind of what we've been catching up with as we can, with organizing all the autopsy related stuff.
So, quick follow up. Do you it sounds like that would help us to attract somebody for the pathology role if we had that in place.
Well, we couldn't do autopsies without an autopsy
Right.
assistant.
But yeah, so we're not going to get one if we don't have the assistant in place.
Right.
Right. Got it.
Further questions? I have one more, sorry. Just looking at the plan to spend $48,000 for a vehicle replacement this year. Could you just fill us in on the quality of the vehicles you have and the difficulties? We've talked, but
Yeah.
the board needs to know.
So we have 2 response vans, if for lack of a better word, that we can go respond to calls. And those are 2017 Ford Transit, I believe, vans. They're terrible in the winter, absolutely terrible. All of the deputies got stuck this winter. I don't know much about cars, but it's something about rear wheel drive or not lack of rear wheel drive. I don't know. But they've all requested better, heavier vans. They don't necessarily have a lot of miles on them, so it's kind of a conflict for me to try to figure out that we need to replace the van when it's not falling apart yet. But I have not looked into buying a new van.
Any further questions? Thanks, Laurie. Oh, sorry, Mr. Pugh.
Quick thing though, if we do get the autopsy assistant and we can't get a pathologist, can they still do work in your office that would actually help you out?
Yes.
Okay.
We are out of space. Well, obviously, we're not doing autopsy, so we don't need this space right now, but we are completely out of storage space to do more autopsies. And so we've been slowly, when we have time, which isn't a lot, going through the different things that we store.
I think it's real this time. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
The coroner also has a special revenue fund, the coroner statutory fee fund. This is, most of the fees come from cremations. And this fund is used mainly to buy supplies and equipment to help with the coroner's job. So if looking at the revenue and expenses, we're budgeting to spend the projected fees on items. However, if they don't get spent or get moved back, they roll back into fund balance and can be spent in later years. But they are they can only be spent on certain items based on the statute.
That's where the vans come. We pay for the vans out of that fund.
Yes.
Ms. Lakshmi.
This may be more of a Travis question than a Lori question, but is there a minimum balance required for the statutory fee fund?
I'd have to review the statute, but I don't think there is an exact minimum that has to be maintained. We don't want to go negative.
Looks like we have no further questions. Thank you. Next up, we have the sheriff.
Good evening. Green means go, right? All right, so several budget lines that we'll be going over tonight, falling under my leadership. The first one is our Sheriff's Office law enforcement budget. It's a flat budget for our fiscal year 25, except for contractual increases. And there's also some increases in there for the DCFS deputy that that we're expecting reimbursement for. And so if you see a little bit, for an example, I think gas is one of those for $4,000 extra. We're expecting reimbursement for that amount of money. The other contractual increases, we don't have a whole lot of contracts that are going up this next year, except for like MetCat, our 911 center, and that will increase, and those increases are included in the budget for fiscal year 26. A couple of requests that I have, I took a look at our overtime budgets in both law enforcement and corrections, and these are not reflected in, the increase requests are not reflected in what the budget is presented, but they are reflected in budget request forms that you have in front of you that were completed. Basically, we have, when looking at our overtime since fiscal year 22, our average is about $450,000 a year. Our budget is always about $175,000 a year. And so to me, it makes sense if you decide you want to integrate the average into our budget, knowing that we're likely going to have to spend that much. I did put that request in there, not necessarily that it's going to be more money, but it's what we're expecting to have to spend in overtime in fiscal year 26. And so I did put that in a request form, just if we're looking to be as accurate as possible with the budget for fiscal year 26. About 113,000 of that is reimbursable for us. And that would include like like U of I football games and other types of things that we would be reimbursed for overtime. So 113,000 of that 400 and some thousand is reimbursable. The rest of it is overtime. And that brings me into my next point of additional staff. And so for the last few years, I've been asking for additional staff. I think it's imperative that we add 2 additional sergeant positions. The reason why is because we do not have 24/7 sergeant coverage because of some complications. If you recall, last year, I presented this to the board. I was going to try to use money we had left over from the budgets and things, and that never did come to fruition because of some union issues and because of some staffing issues. But I believe it does not make sense for a modern police department to not have our size, to not have 24/7 supervisory coverage. And so that is my top priority in 2026, is adding 2 sergeant positions. And so there is 24/7 supervisory coverage for our law enforcement. I also have put in there 4 deputy positions. Now, I'm negotiable. Those sergeant positions and deputy positions could be collaborated. We could have 2 deputies and 2 sergeants. They're all going towards extra personnel. What I'm thinking is that we could use that additional overtime money and potentially pay for a couple other deputies or sergeants. Because the more deputies I have, we have minimums. And I told Travis I wasn't going to go into a whole lot of detail tonight to keep things moving along. But we have minimums through our collective bargaining contracts. And so when we go below those minimums, we have to pay a deputy overtime to come in and work those shifts. Obviously, the more deputies we have, the less overtime we have to pay because we don't have to do that as often. And so that is something I would like for you to consider, is how we can best use that money. We will spend that money next year. It's how we think is best to use that money for law enforcement, and then it'll be corrections that I talk about next to continue being as close on budget as we can. I believe that covers the sheriff budget for correction. So I'll go through the first 2 and then maybe ask questions. Okay. The next is for our correctional center. And so for the correctional center is a flat budget as well, except for contractual increases. This one's a little unique. So I think our only contractual increase we have is our food costs. And so contractually, I believe that's 3%. And so I added 3% into the budget that was submitted to you to start reviewing. Other than that, everything else has been a request, and it's not included in the budget yet. What we did is when we talked with Michelle and Travis, we decided to hold the jail medical contract steady at fiscal year 25 rates, because we will go out to RFP at the end of this year for a new medical contract. It will be more expensive than what we're paying in fiscal year 25. However, instead of trying to estimate what that would be, I will come back to the board for the extra money that we need above and beyond what we budgeted in 2020 or in fiscal year 25. And therefore, we will get the budget amendment then that we need for that extra money. So for your healthcare, we see it flat from 2025 to 2026. Request that I have is, again, increase to the corrections overtime. This is a little bit different because we don't get it reimbursed for any of the corrections overtime. So all of this is because of supplementing staff, because of going below the contractual minimums, things like that. The average overtime since fiscal year 22 is $386,287 a year. Our budget is $212,846. And so we know we're going to go over that. We are consistently under. We're actually doing pretty good right now on numbers, but we are consistently understaffed, trying to find qualified people, which then increases our overtime budget. I believe that adding correctional officers will pay for itself. We can reduce the overtime budget, and we can increase the number of correctional personnel we have, and then that will help even it out. Plus, it also gives us that officer wellness, that more of a work-life balance, that then will help us retain employees a lot longer. And so my suggestion would be that we do one of the two. We either budget what we think we're going to spend based on the numbers over the last 4 years. And I neglected to say, but that's also including what I expect we're going to spend the rest of fiscal year 25. And so my suggestion is we either increase that amount to what we expect we're going to spend, or we look at how we can invest that in employees and then reduce the overtime amount, increase the non-slip employee line items. We also, so I requested money for an explosives canine for the courthouse. This is something that I requested last year as well. One comment I got last year, and one thing you'll see when we're talking about the specialty funds, is that I have budgeted in specialty funds for replacement of 2 narcotics canines for next year. That was a request of the board that if we're going to do things, try to do them out of specialty funds instead of from the general fund. However, there is no specialty fund for a explosives canine. We had our explosives canine handler who went to the U of I Police Department a few years ago. The dog was retired at that point, and we have not replaced that dog. I believe with the courthouse in 2025, with our political climate, with Bennett Administrative Center here right across the street, I think for a county our size, it makes sense that we have an explosives canine, and I don't want to be known as a sheriff that got rid of the explosives canine and something happens. And so I would strongly suggest that we look at funding that. That's about a $25,000 one-time expense, and then I would expect about $1,500 thereafter for food and vet bills and things like that. I'm also, as I have in the past, I'm also requesting 2 additional court security officers. We currently have 13 court security officers. We have 14 judges. That allows 1 court security officer for each of the 11 courtrooms, and then 2 court security officers for the front door. That does not allow for vacations, for sick time, anything like that, at which time court security officers need to double up on courtrooms. I don't know if you saw what happened in Las Vegas here within the last couple of years, where somebody went over the bar, they actually attacked the judge, and they had to get in there right away to subdue that person. I don't want to make headlines because we've had a court security officer that was covering multiple courtrooms. I don't think it's legal because the statute says we have to have a court security officer in every single court proceeding that's occurring in Champaign County, but we've managed it so far. And so I would strongly consider that I would strongly recommend that we consider a couple extra additional court security officers as well. At that time, I'm going to stop with these 2 budgets. These 2 are the biggest budgets that I have, and entertain any questions you might have for these.
Mr. Esri?
Thank you. Sheriff, I guess I have a couple questions, but mainly your response to the first one will dictate my second one. Is Thomasboro still considering contracting with the county? Do you know, are they still actively, or have they killed that?
To my knowledge, they are for 2 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay. But that hasn't happened yet.
Correct.
And then, so if that were to happen and your staffing stays as it is right now, how would that potentially, if at all, affect the rest of the county, say the coverage for the county or anything compared to what it is now?
Well, that would take a deputy in Thomasboro for 2 hours a day for 7 days a week. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal because there's not a set time that we have to be there, different things like that. But we wouldn't be able to commit to, say, for an example, if Homer came forward asking for a full-time deputy or more hours, we would not be able to do something like that. Now, on the flip side, if they paid for a full-time deputy, this is a different conversation, right? Because we're getting reimbursed for the salary of a full-time deputy. But yes, at this point, not a huge impact. But you have to remember, for a county our size, 1,000 square miles, we generally run at minimum deputies.
Ellie?
Going back to the patrol sergeants, how many hours do we have coverage for now?
A lot of times there is 24/7 coverage, but there is not a provision that requires a sergeant to be on at all times. I don't want to say too much about that right now at this point, but I'm happy to have a conversation one-on-one with you about that. Conversations on making that happen have included adding 2 additional sergeants to make that 24/7 coverage happen. So with contract negotiations coming up at the end of this year, I'm very reluctant on talking about things right now, but my priority is having a sergeant on 24/7. And if it takes adding 2 additional ones, then I think that's something we need to consider.
Ms. Rogers?
Hi, Dustin.
Hey.
I'm not sure how much you can go into this question because of what you just said, but I do recall last year when you came to the board, and I don't remember at what time that was, you said that you had 2 people maybe or 3 and you were going to promote them so that you could, is that what you're saying didn't happen and now you're requesting the additional people?
Yes, I was hoping that given some extra funds and things like that, that we could go ahead and do that mid-year and then come back to the county board with a plan moving forward. However, due to some union negotiation issues, as well as staffing issues, that did not occur. Yes. So it's not 2 additional in addition to that.
Mr. Pugh?
Yeah, sorry. Is it possible we can get like kind of like a sheet or something that breaks down how much on average we're paying overtime for both the deputies and for the the correction center, and how much each of these positions would cost, like all fully entailed?
Yeah, I actually have those in my notes, so I'm happy to provide you that information. Yeah.
Hey, let me for the whole board. That'd be
Sure.
a good idea. Yeah. Because if we're paying these people overtime already, why not hire them to cover this stuff? That's all.
Ms. Lakshan?
Could you repeat the number for the canine? You said 25,000 for a one-time?
Yes, I believe it'd be about 25,000 because we have to buy the dog and the initial
Right.
training.
And what was was that annual or monthly for the other number?
About 1,500 annually.
1,500 annually.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. It all depends on vet bills and things, but a healthy dog, 1,500 annually is sufficient.
I have a question. This is top of your head. Training a correctional officer, because I know we've had some turnover because of lots of places that are more appealing for whatever reason. How much does it usually cost to train a brand new correctional officer?
So it's 8 hours, or it's 8 weeks of the academy. It's at least 6 weeks of field training. That's where we're paying a correctional officer extra money to train this correctional officer that cannot work on his or her own yet. And that's at least 6 weeks. And that's not including any of the specialty taser training or anything like that. So off the top of my head, I would say we probably have about $15,000 or $20,000 invested in a correctional officer from the time we hire them to the time they're on their own.
And it's your position or your estimation that if we had more correctional officers so that they were working less overtime, we might be able to retain more correctional officers?
Yeah, so it will do a couple of things. It will allow us to retain more correctional officers because they're working less overtime. And it would also allow us to have more flexibility. If we are down 3 or 4 positions, it's not as much of a hindrance towards our operations because we're used to working 10 down. And I've almost got our number to where it needs to be, but we need more people. So that way, when we do have somebody on military leave, or we do have a few people who leave, it seems like they always leave in 3 or 4s, that we're not then having somebody work 60 or 70 hours a week, which then makes them want to leave too. And so it really does provide us flexibility.
And then I guess consequences of if we didn't have enough and we were 10 down or 12 down, that means out of county housing again, correct?
It does.
Yeah, because we can't just release people.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Mr. Thors?
So Dustin, if we get extra deputies, extra sergeants too, I imagine that means also extra vehicles, right? Because as I understand, that's their office, that's their spot. And do they share often vehicles, or is there like that one ugly one that sits in a lot when one of them's in maintenance and they get the ugly one, right?
That's correct. And I can tell you, well, I can look up, I did figure, it looks like per deputy, and the same would be the same for a sergeant, per a deputy or sergeant. The initial startup would be about $100,000 a deputy, with reoccurring about $20,000. And so there would be an upfront cost with vehicle and equipment and things like that. But then about $20,000 after that, not including salary, to maintain the extra with 911 and all of those things we would need to do. Yes.
Ellie?
I'm sorry, I have a totally non-budget related question. Where does the canine live?
The canine lives with the handler.
Okay, so the officer.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further questions? I think we can move on to the next of your funds.
All right, merit commission. And so I have a merit commission that is in charge of the hiring and firing of the majority of my employees, law enforcement, corrections, and core security officers. It's a flat budget from fiscal year 25. Basically what this does is it pays for the written exam, it pays for the psychological exams, it pays for the medical exams that all my employees have to go through. I have requested an increase to the budget in the amount of $17,840, which is the average of extra we have to spend every year. And what happens when we run out of that is we take it from the law enforcement or corrections budget then afterwards. And so if we're trying to see exactly where we need to budget things at, I was not able to identify anywhere that we would be able to take it from law enforcement or corrections because we kind of piecemeal it at that point. But we also don't know how many hires we're going to have each year. And so that's why it's kind of difficult to determine, but our average was 17,000 and some that were always over budget for merit commission for that officer testing.
Any questions about the merit commission? Mr. Farney?
This actually might be more for Travis. Looking in the budget binder, the numbers aren't adding up. This might be another one of those ones where the system. This is on page 18 of tonight's, because it shows the 2024 numbers being the 44,000 and then flat budget for this year, so it doesn't reflect any increase from the sheriff.
That's probably because this increase request, you talk about the 17,000.
Mm-hmm.
This increase request is a request. It's not integrated
So
into the
it's
budget
not already
yet.
in there. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
Any further questions?
What's next, Travis? All right, so this is a specialty fund, our drug forfeiture fund. These next few funds are regulated by statute. Funds distributed into it and funds taken out of it are all regulated by statute. It's difficult to predict the number of cases that'll be handled when we're pursuing asset forfeiture as appropriate. That's why it's difficult to really know exactly how much money we're going to get into this fund. However, I have budgeted, and this is one that is in the budget. I went ahead for my increases for these specialty funds because they're specialty and not come from general revenue. I did go ahead and integrate those in the budget. Of course, you have to approve the final budget, but I did integrate those into the numbers in front of you. So this is where I will take the two canines from. So I increased the budget for expenditures and drug forfeitures by about $50,000 to help cover those first-time expenses.
Mr. Votava?
With the canine units, does this include the one proposed for the courthouse, or are these a separate set of canine units?
These are separate. So these are narcotics canines. I'm able to take those out of asset forfeiture, but I'm not able to take the explosives canine out of asset forfeiture because of how the statute reads.
Understood. Thank you. Yep.
Any further questions? I think we're ready to move on.
Cannabis Regulation Fund. And so this revenue from this comes from, because we had questions in the past, revenue for this comes from taxes from legal sales of cannabis in the state of Illinois to fight illegal sales of cannabis in the state of Illinois. So that's where the money comes from into this fund. And it is also a special use fund. And so it has to be used on special things, equipment, training, education, different things like that. Planned increase in expenditures for software cost and training expenses by about $7,000. And that's pretty self-explanatory for the Cannabis Regulation Fund. We don't have a whole heck of a lot of money in there. This is a newer fund within the last couple of years.
Ms. Lakshin?
I guess I'm trying to understand on the cannabis regulation, how broad a purchase can you make on that? Like, what are there things that you can justify under that fund, or is it like, oh, this is the list of very specific items that you can buy?
I will say that the state's attorney's office and I have conversations on things that I may be able to purchase out of that fund because it's not specific. It's very general as long as it's related to illegal cannabis market. And so I always like to run it by them before I would spend anything that's not specifically in the statute.
Any other questions? I think we're ready to move on to jail commissary.
All right, jail commissary. So this is probably out of the specialty funds. This is probably the one that has changed the most. I've been asked by the county board over the last couple of years to spend down some of this money. So this is, this comes from, we make certain commission on food items. So for an example, if we have, if an inmate wants a candy bar, they will pay a certain amount of commission on that candy bar. That commission comes back into this fund and it has to be used on inmate safety and welfare. We generally as a county don't make commission on a lot of things. For an example, phone calls and things like that, that a lot of counties make commission for. We do not make commission on a lot of things that other counties make money for. And so we do have quite a healthy fund balance in here, but it's not, it's because we haven't spent it down in a regular fashion. It's not because we're making lots and lots of money every single year. So in the hopes of spending some of this down while also taking advantage of our beautiful new facility that we have, many of you know Celeste, my programs coordinator. She has a lot of good ideas for inmate programs and different things like that, that we can use our new space that we haven't been able to do before. And so these things aren't necessarily specific. I wouldn't necessarily be able to say, these are the 5 programs we're going to be able to fund with the extra money I'm asking for in this. But I wanted to make sure that she had enough money that if she wanted to do something, a new program-wise that could benefit inmates, that we had the leeway to be able to do that. And some of these things also, other things that I can do is we have an inmate, or we have a purchase of a new corrections van. Well, I can't buy the van out of this, but I can buy the safety equipment that comes in the van out of this. I've also put $150,000 in here to finish out the 24/7 medical pilot. And so the pilot, if you recall, you did a budget amendment this year to get us through the end of this year. The county is paying out of the general fund the regular medical cost for next year, but anything above and beyond I felt was justified using these funds for. And so I budgeted $150,000 to get us through May for the extra 24/7 coverage for inmate healthcare. And so there are quite a few things in here that I think will give us a good opportunity to really look at inmate programming and inmate safety and different things like that. And the good thing about it, though, is that if we don't use it, it all goes back into this fund. And so I have to use it for inmate welfare, inmate safety. It's not like you approve more than I use and I can use it for something else. That's not how these specialty funds work.
Mr. Votava?
Is that what is included as part of the $202,500 is for those programs under professional services? Since that jumped up from 17,000?
Yes, so that's the reason in those professional services is that healthcare cost. That's why that increased so substantially. Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Jail medical costs, this is a pass-through fund. It stays the same every single year. That's why you see $10,010 for the revenue, $10,010 for the expenditure, and not very much of a fund balance there. Pass-through fund that really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot for our jail medical costs. Last but not least, emergency management also falls under the sheriff's office. And this is a flat budget in fiscal year 2026 from fiscal year 2025, except for regular salary increases. So that's why things are pretty well even, except for a little bit, what is it, $7,000 extra for fiscal year 26. The one thing I did not mention for, I guess I kind of alluded to it, but for corrections and for law enforcement, is we also have contract negotiations. And so we will see an increase in the amount of personnel budgeted, but we don't know what that's going to be yet. And so out of that, those are going to be our substantial costs that we just don't know what they are right now. Are there any questions over any of this? I know it's a lot of information. I'm happy to have offline conversations. I have a lot of notes. I'm happy to, to give anybody who wants them afterwards. I want to be transparent in this, and I also want to make sure I make my case for why these things are important.
Any questions to wrap up our sheriff's presentation? Thanks, Dustin.
Thank you.
Next up, our circuit clerk. Green means go in this room. It's terrible.
Green is my favorite color, so it's good. You all can read the slides. I just wanted to give you a little information that is not in the slides to give you a little background about why you see the information there that you do. There are some additional budget requests this year that are unusual for my office because I haven't asked for them before. This is my 5th year in. My budgets have stayed relatively flat during that time period, except for contract budget increases. But we're now at a point where my office, which is based on revenue from fees, is hitting a substantial barrier caused by revenues being cut by the Supreme Court and the legislature. And that is why you see revenues down in the general corporate fund, because in the last 2 years, we have seen monies cut by the fact that we do not have bond fees, the fact that people do not have to pay their traffic fees anymore because they can keep their license irrespective of how many cases they have, the fact that if you have the public defender as your attorney in your misdemeanor or your felony case, that you are no longer required to pay fines or assessments of any amount. And that's a huge hit for us. 86% of people in felony cases are now represented by the public defender because private attorneys cannot get bond assignments anymore to guarantee their fees. 80% of people in misdemeanor cases are represented by the public defender. And so when we lose that kind of revenue, that is a substantial concern for our office. And I'm sorry that every year I have to come to you and say, but we lost this money, but we lost this money, but we lost this money. This year in particular is a big hit for our budget. And we have gone from a place where when I started, we were averaging about $3 million a year in revenue to a place where the revenue has now gone down to what I estimate next year will be about 1.1 million in revenue. That's a big cut. And it's obvious that both the legislature and the Supreme Court are saying to counties, we expect you to foot the bill for access to justice, because they have not replaced the revenue that they have taken from the fees that are supposed to fund the operations of this office. And that is a very serious concern at a time where we are seeking money. One of the things that's a particular concern when those fees are going down is the specialty funds are also hit by this. So it's not just a hit on the general fund, it's a hit on my specialty funds too. And that's why you see a budget request from me this year for digitization. There, I said the word right this time, for the records of our office. This, unfortunately, is a project that has not been done in years prior to me, and it is a dire need at this point. Jen has seen this. Some other of you folks have not had the opportunity to see this, but if you go to my basement storage, which is stacked literally to the ceiling and pretty much all the aisles of the basement storage space, and in my office, which while cleaned up and looking a lot tidier, still has tons of paper in it. The need for digitization is there because we are out of space for storage now. And it's a concern for the people that use the office as well, because somebody who needs to come in and get a copy of their divorce judgment because they need to go to Social Security and get their funds, or to their pension administrator and get their money, or their name change document to change all the things they need with their driver's license, or old probate kinds of cases in order to take care of real estate or different things that happen through these estate cases. It's a cumbersome project for them when so much of what they need is on paper and not readily accessible through digitized records. And so what you see in the budget request that I asked for is a lot of money. But the money that I asked for in that budget request is nothing compared to what the actual cost, I'm afraid, is going to be for the digitization of those funds. I have requested money from the state to help with those funds, and so far they have said no. But I'm hoping that this time, in the 5th request that I make this year, that perhaps they will say yes. So I appreciate your good thoughts in that regard. But I did want to explain to you why that particular elephant in the room is out there. And it looks bad in comparison to the other stuff I have asked for. Michelle, Travis, and I had some fruitful discussions about other requests that I made not in the budget. And sadly to say, I think we're going to go ahead with the 2 additional people in the office from the funds I already have, because we still have turnover. Not as bad as it was 2 years ago. And thanks to you all helping me with increasing salaries to a more just figure, the turnover is not as bad as it was 2 years ago, but it's still there. So when the sheriff talked about how people leave his office in 3s and 4s, that's happening to me too. And so unfortunately that turnover, while it's bad in terms of training and how people come into the office, mean that there are additional funds which we project can help increase the staffing by 2 people in this coming year. The slides tell you why that's necessary. And unfortunately, as the Supreme Court and the legislature have said, we're taking money away from you, they continue to increase what we are obligated to do. And one of the things that we anticipate will happen in this next year is a project that will require us to automatically do expungements of records going back in time to 1970. So think about that for a moment. That is, at this point, 55 years worth of records, many of which are on paper and not digitized, and will require so much work that I'm actually trying not to think about that too much, because that is a huge new responsibility for our office. And it is our office and not any other office funded by the state. So that is why we're trying to anticipate what we need to do to take on that new responsibility. Michelle, Travis, and I also talked about expansion of the office because I need to have a place for the 2 new people to be able to sit. So we have actually walked through a couple of scenarios that we might use for that. And that is going to require some further discussions to see if those scenarios are going to work and not conflict with other needs that people have for courthouse expansion. So wish me luck as we go through that particular process. So the slides tell you a little bit more about the storage needs and why those happen and what our responsibilities are. And in the general fund, as you remember, we put together the general fund with a couple of the specialty funds because at this point, with revenue declination, some more expenses are being paid out of that general fund. And that's why you see some of those things together. And also, we talked about the digitization and the storage and all that kind of good stuff. We just talked about that new act that might increase the things that we are doing. And sad to say, even though we've been trying to transfer as much money as we can from our special revenue funds to the general fund to help us defray our operational expenses, we don't have as much money to help with that as we used to. That's why I wanted you all to see this. So I squished up a whole bunch of stuff about the general fund on those 3 slides. Travis is very proud of me because it doesn't look like the Tolstoy book it started with. So that's the general fund. Are there any questions about that before we go on to the specialty funds?
Ms. Hanover Friedman.
So the 2 new positions that are, because we have a request for 2 legal clerks.
Correct.
But did I understand correctly that you actually don't need 2 new positions because there's a way to work it out of the
We need
current
the 2
line?
positions. We need to put the 2 positions in. So that would add to the 33 people I have now and make it 35. That's a good question. But I'm not asking for additional funding for those 2 positions because I want to see, as Michelle and I talked about in FY26, if the turnover actually helps me fund those 2 positions without asking for extra money for them. Does that make more sense? Okay.
Yes. Any other questions?
Trying to save some money.
Mr. Essery?
Not directly related to the budget, but you did the digitization, but I have issues with just I don't know if I've ever heard this from you. Other counties, are they experiencing the same issues? I assume they are, but
so here's what happens in counties our size as opposed to the smaller counties. Smaller counties are getting grant money from the state to do the digitization of their records. And that's because they don't have as much as we do, but they also don't have money at all to be able to pay for this. Even with the revenues that they have, you're talking about a county that has 10,000 people. They're just not making enough revenue to pay for this. The big counties, and we know what they are, Cook, DuPage, they're getting the money too, because while they have additional funds, they don't have as much as what they need to be able to do the literally trillions of records that they have that need that process. The counties our size, you're talking about Champaign, McLean, Sangamon, Peoria, and counties like us. That's kind of where the hit is coming from. We're not big enough to require the additional funds. We're not small enough to say, but we don't have any money yet. We may be getting there, but we're not quite there. So all of us who are in that middle area, and we just had a Clerks Association meeting on Friday, have been talking about the fact that we hope that this year is our turn. It's not going to be all the money that I requested in our special fund request, but it could be something, which is better than the 0 we have gotten so far.
Any other questions? I think we can move on to your next fund.
Well, the rest of these are not quite as exciting. We have 2 that are related to child support. One is a contract that we have from the Department of Healthcare and Family Services. That's where that revenue comes from, period. And that is based on the number of cases that we process in the office. That basically sets up accounts through the state disbursement unit where people are getting their child support paid from. And you can see the revenue is relatively flat with this because it has not been much of a change in terms of the number of cases in the last 2 years. But we are not spending more than we take in from those particular fees, and we are not paying from a person out of that fund anymore because we're just not getting the revenue. Because another place for the state has cut money, see a theme here, is that they cut back the amount of the reimbursement for this particular fund. Court automation. This is a fund that even though the money comes into my office that Judge Rosenbaum and I actually work on together, because it's a fund that pays for automation expenses both in my office and in the circuit court. So it is a cooperative fund that allows for purchases of computers, scanners, other related technology that allows us to do the things in our offices that we need to do. It pays for software licenses, and it does other things that we need to do for those particular items. As you can see, the revenue totals so far have stayed a little bit flat, which is good because some of the other funds are going down. That one has been better. We unfortunately have had to eat into our fund balance, however, because we did need to buy some additional computer scanners and software to support operations within the court and my office that have not been budgeted. And so that's where you see we did have to spend some money from the fund balance to help with that. And part of that is also because, like with everything else, the software licenses have increased in expenditure, and computers that we purchase with the help of IT, of course, have also gone up. And with tariffs, we expect that will go up again next year. And that's why we try to buy ahead this year. So that's where we are with that. The other thing that we did to fix cost was to enter into a new contract for our case management system starting in January. That will be a 3-year contract that says the cost is exactly the same for those 3 years, and they let us spread the payments over the year. So it's not a big old payment that's due at the beginning of the year. We're able to spread it out over the 12 months so that we know exactly what the cost is, but it also matches better with how our revenues are coming in.
Any questions? I have one. Was the 3 years picked because that's anticipated for how long it will take for us to get our eventual JANO replacement?
That's a good question. And if I were more optimistic, I would say, geez, I wish that might only take 3 years. But I am looking at what has happened in other counties that are going through the electronic case management replacement. And I don't think 3 years is enough, but at least that gets us through a period of time where we will know if we are going to go that route, and if so, what the cost will be and to plan for it. And that's why we did the 3-year contract, is frankly just to buy us the time we're going to need and still have a case management system while we figure out what we're doing. P.S. I got a huge box in my office today, which is the start of our bidding process for the potential new system. And I looked at the box and said, why am I getting this big old box from Tyler? I kind of forgot they were coming to me. But we're continuing with the process. And we will be bringing a report to the board, I think in October, that will tell you where we are and what we got.
Any other questions? Okay, move on.
This is the other child support service, which is funded through the annual fee that people pay in order to take care of the cost of their accounts through our office. And in case you're wondering, that's a fee, as the sheriff was talking about, where we can only make certain expenditures because it's a special fund. The Operations and Administration Fund is basically a catch-all for the miscellaneous expenditures we have to have for the office. And one of the things that we did this year through grant was to add some expenditures for both my office and actually the courts so that we could have a certified ASL interpreter software in order for people that have hearing disabilities to be able to use the courts in our office. And the impetus for this was when somebody came in one day who had a hearing disability, and I could not communicate with him except for writing stuff down on a piece of paper, and then he would write back down to me, and we went through that whole process, and we don't have an ASL interpreter full-time in the courthouse. So having this software enables us to do what a full-time interpreter would do, but make it more accessible for the patrons and the folks in the courtroom. So we're proud of that. Oh, and you can see money from this fund goes to the general corporate fund. And this is my final special fund. If all goes well, we anticipate that e-citations will start in October. We are waiting on folks who are working on this from MetCAD and the Tyler folks who are actually providing the software to make this work to see how soon we can actually roll this out. But every day that passes where we get traffic tickets and have to open up cases while we're looking at somebody's writing that's actually worse than mine makes me wish for this to happen as soon as possible. So we're excited about this. We have paid up front for most of the cost of this for the next 5 years from the fees that we have collected through my office. And then we have one payment left for next year, which is why you see that $100,000 expenditure for next year. And then we will continue to build the fund for the e-citation program so that at the end of 5 years, the hope is that we'll have sufficient money to go on for the next 5 years.
Looks like we have no questions.
Yay. Oh, I forgot. I don't know why this one is last. I was so excited about e-citation, I forgot. Document storage is what you all actually allowed me to pass a budget amendment on last month to pay for the first small project on digitization. So document storage is a fancy way of saying, what do we do with our records? That's all. Sorry. I have so many funds, I forget.
Well, thank you for the walk through all of them. I'm sure we'll think about it.
And you are welcome to come to my office anytime. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Susan.
Next up, Judge Rosenbaum for the Circuit Court.
Good evening. We have 5 funds. The first one is the general corporate, which is the main fund that we have. And we haven't made any huge changes this year. We don't plan on making huge changes next year. So it's really kind of a simplistic kind of budget this year. I just want to highlight that we did receive a grant this year for new assistive listening devices in all of the courtrooms. We've also had a lot of training for American with Disabilities Act. We also have hired an executive assistant who has joined a committee to work on statewide language access issues. So we're very happy with the way that the general fund is working. The one concern that we have this year about the general fund is that every year we seem to be over budget on professional services and attorneys. Professional services is interpreters, it's psych evaluations and transcripts. Attorneys are contract attorneys and attorneys we have to pay when there's conflicts, for example, with the public defender's office or such as in family court. We talked a little bit, or Susan McGrath talked a lot about the fee waivers and the hit the county has taken in collection of criminal fees, but there's also a civil fee waiver that applies, and that applies to everything that happens in civil cases, including the appointment of guardian ad litems. And so we've seen a huge uptick in the amount of money the court has to pay for guardians ad litem in family law cases. So it's really kind of interesting in that sense. So I suspect we're probably going to be asking for a budget amendment at the end of the year. We'll probably do it in a couple of steps so you're not shell-shocked at the very end. But my understanding is that when we do budget amendments, and we've done it for the last couple of years for this, it doesn't get added to our original budgets. It's sort of like a bonus. It's not a salary increase. So every year we're coming for a budget amendment at the end of the year, and I suspect that's going to happen again this year. The other thing I did want to mention with respect to the general fund, although it's not directly related to the fund itself, is that there has been some discussion at the Facilities Committee about the need for a 12th courtroom. I don't want to go into a lot of details, but I've met with a lot of people, the county executive, Michelle Jett, and others. County board members have come to the courthouse to get a tour. The initial thought was to build an addition, and I think that you have set aside some money in 2026 for an architect to potentially do a design for an addition, which would be massive and expensive and time-consuming. The judges have come up with an idea which I think has gotten at least some traction with administration, which is to take one of our large courtrooms and split it in two. It would just be a remodeling job. It would cost a lot less money, and it could be done a lot quicker. So I think that's something that there are going to be further discussions about in this coming year. But generally, the circuit court budget is relatively flat. We are going to ask for the budget amendment. Any questions about the general fund? All right, thank you. This is the jury commission fund. It's always hard to tell how many jury trials we're going to have in any given week, month, or year, but the trend tends to be that we're increasing them. We do have the jury commission and grand jury, which is now meeting in this room. We've been doing that for the last few weeks. And again, we have the new assisted listening devices for jurors who have hearing impairments, and we use those quite often during jury trials. But this is rather stagnant, not a lot going on with this fund. Why don't we just do some of these funds just together? The next one is the Law Library Fund. The Law Library Fund is unusual because we don't have a huge law library right now. It's a shelving unit with some books and a computer. We hope someday with the renovation for the 12th courtroom, we can return to having that very nice law library on the second floor used again. We do have a retired attorney who volunteers along with the Illinois Justice Corps staff to help with the self-help center. We received access to justice grants, and we're going to be hosting, we did host an Illinois Court Navigator Network Central Region visit back in May, which was wonderful. We got people from around the state coming here, and we brainstormed ideas of what other people are doing that might be helpful for us, and we gave them ideas which were very helpful to them. That's the Law Library Fund. Specialty, oh, you have a question? Yes, sir.
Yes, I do. For 2026, we're showing under personnel expenditures, nothing? Go ahead.
The one I have,
I believe Travis
doesn't
can
have-
answer.
Unpaid.
Yeah, so there are expenditures in, for the law library in non-personnel, but in personnel, it's still up in the air whether or not, in the past, there had been a portion of personnel expenditures budgeted there and expended from there. It's still to be determined for 26 whether that portion is going to be there or paid out of another budget. So that's where that is. It's in another budget now.
Still here as part of this general fund or a different fund?
Law library is not general fund.
Oh, special fund, my mistake. But would it be coming out of this one or a different one?
Oh, let me, what Lord? Yeah, it would be the general fund.
we added a staff position. When we added a staff position a couple years ago that had been vacant for many, many years, part of the agreement to get that back with the board was that we would pay, I think, fringes or part of it out of the law library fund. And I think the discussion is whether the intention of the board was that that would continue forever or not. So that's the difference now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Go on to the next one there. Specialty courts, I am not a specialist in specialty courts. I know that we have other folks here who know a lot more about it, such as our state's attorney and our public defender who have been using some of these funds to add staff. What I can tell you is that we were just approved for the third year of a 3-year grant, and we are trying our best to continue to expand the use of that fund, which is up to $400,000 a year. We did fill a case manager position a couple months ago, and this person is fantastic. I'm really afraid we're going to lose her. She's so wonderful. So we're trying our best to use the Redeploy Illinois Fund. And I did confirm, because I know there was some discussion about the fear of federal funding and what's going to happen there. I believe this is a state-funded grant, so we don't have to worry about that. Any questions about the specialty courts budget?
Looks like that's a no.
All right, and then mortgage foreclosure mediation is a very small fund. There have been fewer filings, so our revenue is going down. We don't really spend much. We use Dispute Resolution Institute at no additional cost to the county, who helps resolve these. And this does reduce the number of court cases, and it really helps people stay in their homes if they can. So it's a wonderful program. It doesn't cost much money. Not much to add about that. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Also seeing here that phone and internet has been zeroed out after, in addition to, I guess it's a relatively low value as well, but is there something happening in 2026 that doesn't need a phone?
Well, I think that, to be quite honest, dispute resolution, they come to the courthouse, they meet with people. I think that they do phone calls and emails. I think we cut it because there really is no internet expense for us for that particular program.
Do you get to sort of piggyback on existing services and don't have to pay separately, or is this budgeted otherwise?
If we ever had to use some kind of internet, yeah, I suppose it would be from the judge or the judge's clerk or somebody else, but dispute resolution does most of the work pursuant to this grant. So they would be the ones who would be using their own internet.
Any further questions? Nope. Okay, I think we're all good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up, we have Juvenile Detention Center.
Hi, I'm Shannon Siders. I am the Director of Champaign County Probation and Court Services. The first one here is for the Juvenile Detention Center, which falls under my supervision. All of our salaries, for those of you who are new or unaware, are reimbursed by AOIC, the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts. So all of our Juvenile Detention Center employees, the county pays, and then AOIC reimburses us for their salaries. So for the state fiscal year, they are doing full funding again. So AOIC will continue to reimburse for all Juvenile Detention Center salaries. They do not reimburse for overtime costs, but they do at least cover the salaries. The only increases in this budget were for the medical services and the food services for the juveniles in custody at the detention center. I did not know until Dustin said tonight about the medical. So we are under the same contracts as what the jail uses. We just kind of get tacked on to the jail. So I did not know until Dustin mentioned it that they were planning on going out to RFP for the medical expenses next year. So I had budgeted an increase of 7%, which is what our current medical provider had said to budget for. So that's an increase in the medical services. So that's for the medical and the mental health services that ACH provides for our juveniles. And then an increase in the food services. So those were the only two line item increases in the detention center budget. And then I am requesting a new position that I also asked for last year for a dedicated PREA coordinator. PREA is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. And the good news is that I just found out in the past month is that AOIC has already told us that they are going to reimburse us for this position. So when I originally presented my budget to Travis and Michelle, I didn't know that. I didn't have that information. We were just going to be asking for it again. I was going to ask OIC for it, but then they ended up coming back and letting us know that yes, they are going to reimburse us for the position. So that would mean the county would just have to fund the fringes because AOIC does not do fringes. So hopefully that's an easy yes for this position for us, because I think part of the reason AOIC has agreed to go ahead and fund this position is because they put into the new juvenile detention center standards that all facilities have to be PREA certified or initiate the PREA certification process by January of 2027. So to get PREA certified, we need a dedicated PREA coordinator who can dedicate time to coming up with the policies for all the requirements for PREA and making sure we're meeting them. They would be handling training. There's a whole audit process where there's a pre-audit, and then there's the audit, and then there's the post-audit to see what things we need to work on for compliance. So we need a dedicated coordinator who has the time to be able to do those items. Right now we have a supervisor who's doing that role. In addition, she's doing many other things. She's supervising shifts. She organizes all of our volunteers, our interns. She doesn't have the time to strictly dedicate to this process. So we need to get this person on board. And since AOIC has agreed they would already reimburse, they're even saying they could start reimbursement effective December 1st. So I feel I'm hopeful that this is a pretty easy one for you guys to be okay with, because we know that we're going to get the reimbursement for AOIC, and this is something that's required by the juvenile detention standards put out by the Supreme Court at this point. So, and just to give you a quick update on staffing, because I know I haven't been here to talk about that in a while, we had somebody start yesterday, and then we have 2 individuals starting on the 8th of September, which will put us at 1 vacancy at the Juvenile Detention Center, which is completely crazy to even think. I mean, there was a time where before I started in this role, we had sent kids out of county because we had 14 vacancies. So to be in a position where right now we have 3 vacancies and we'll have 1 vacancy by September 8th. Although I will say this is a difficult population we have in custody right now. We may lose some over this population. It happens like that. Detention kind of goes in waves where things are relatively calm and, you know, the population might be down. This is not that group of juveniles in custody right now. And some of our newer staff who kind of started at a time where things were a little bit quieter, we're not prepared for this level of stuff that's going on right now. So send positive thoughts that way, because as you know, I'm sure seriously, as you see in the news, all the stuff that's happening in this community where we have kids being arrested for shooting each other. When those kids come to the detention center, they're not just there for a month. They're there for a long period of time while their court case is getting resolved. And we are not really a great place for a long period of time. We're supposed to be kind of a shorter period of time. And when we have kids in custody for long term like that, they feel like they don't have as much to lose. And so their behavior sometimes reflects that. So it's a difficult time out there right now, but we are very close to being fully staffed. So I'm very proud of that fact. So questions about the detention center portion of the budget?
I have one question about
Yes, ma'am.
The PREA coordinator. It sounds like a very large project at first with developing the policies and everything, but eventually the policies are written, eventually the employees are trained. What's your vision for the PREA coordinator 2 years down the line?
Yeah, so typically what's happening at other facilities, other counties that already have that person kind of becomes in charge of compliance and all the inspections that we have. So we get inspected by the Department of Juvenile Justice every year, and they require a stack of papers about this big that we have to send them in advance about all the stuff that we're doing and then preparing for the inspection. And then the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts comes in every 2 years for 3 days and are doing an inspection like that. So at some point that role will kind of transition into strictly kind of worrying about where we're at compliance wise with all these new standards and items that get dropped on us at the last minute that we have to then figure out how to make happen.
And that compliance person then that it would become, is that something that's also reimbursed by AOIC?
Yeah, yep. Because they're still going to be doing pre-ed duties. They still have to make sure that our staff are getting annual training. They would be doing any investigations that get brought up. So they would still have other, so it's the same. It will still be reimbursed by AOIC.
Any other questions? We can move on to your next one, Shannon.
Okay, so the next one is for probation. And it's similar to JDC with the AOIC reimbursement, but slightly different. So we have some of our probation staff, their salaries are fully covered by AOIC and reimbursed by AOIC. However, 14 of our officers, we only get $1,000 a month for. They're called salary subsidy positions. AOIC is trying to phase those out statewide, but I don't think state budget numbers are looking great at this point. I am always going to be asking to get these positions converted to being fully funded. So they say that we're fully funded, but we do have 14 officers in probation who we only get $1,000 a month for. So I have already asked for them to convert some of those positions, but the rest of our staff, we do get full reimbursement for those people. So that will continue. In the probation budget, is pretty much just personnel. If you look at there's not a lot of money that we're spending in the probation general fund budget other than personnel. I am requesting for one additional probation officer. I asked for this last year. We ended up having an officer that we had who was doing the emerging adult caseload. And so that was a caseload of clients between 18 and 22. And that person would have some more dedicated, they'd have a smaller caseload, so they'd have more time to be able to work with that population of people. Because I almost said kids, because to me, they're still kids. But, you know, their brains aren't fully developed still. It's not like when you turn 18, you automatically download, oh, this is how to be an adult. I know how to do all this stuff just because I'm now 18. They're still struggling. They still need a lot of guidance. And my current caseloads for my staff, they don't have the ability to spend time with that population. We were doing that caseload and we had an officer leave. She went over to Vermilion County Probation to make more money. And we had to take that position and we had to actually convert it into a DUI position, because last year, I think when I was here, I'd asked for help with their DUI numbers. Our DUI numbers have increased even more since last year. So at the end of June of last year, we ended up increasing by 51% to what we have on DUI caseloads this year. So we've increased our DUI caseload number by 51% from the last year to this year. And our probation numbers in general have increased 9% from last year to this year. So my staff are managing extremely high caseloads. I mean, I have officers who have 120 clients. I have officers that have 117, 119, 115. So my staff have pretty high caseloads. And our two DUI officers, one of them had 199 clients and the other had 207. So I couldn't keep that going. So I had to stop doing the emerging adult caseload to be able to split up some of those DUI clients to make that number a little bit better for those officers. So we aren't currently doing the emerging adult caseload, but I think it would be really beneficial to our clients in that age group who need a lot of help still figuring out school, employment, getting an ID, how to make a doctor's appointment. They are still struggling a lot. And I feel like having an officer who has more time to spend with them, to help them make phone calls, to help them call Urbana Adult Ed, you know, they need some more hand holding than what we're currently able to give them within our current caseloads. So I am asking for an additional probation officer, and I will also ask for AOIC, which I already have asked for AOIC to reimburse for that position. But that one, I have not been told yes yet. I just submitted my annual plan to AOIC, and they will get back to me sometime within the next month about whether they would give us additional funding to reimburse for that position. I will say that if they agree to, they don't do any more of those $1,000 a month ones. If they're gonna do it, they're gonna fully do it. So I would potentially maybe know by the time y'all meet in September about whether or not they will say yes. Given the state situation, I'm guessing they're probably not going to say yes, but I've got to, ask anyway for my people. And then my other request for this is for additional front desk assistance. I had asked for this last year as well. We have 2 AFSCME employees who operate our front desk at the probation department right now. They are answering the phones for everyone. So our clients do not call their individual probation officer. All of the clients call the front desk, and the front desk transfers them to their probation officer. We don't have individual office numbers that our clients use. They all call the front desk. So our front desk is getting about 155 phone calls a day. We have about 85 clients walking in the door who are either coming to see a probation officer, do a drug test, coming for a group. We get a lot of foot traffic coming down from court after they've been put on probation. So we have a lot of foot traffic. We have a lot of phone traffic. And when one of them is off, my administrative supervisor is the one who is covering the breaks at the front desk. And so this is my person who is doing our payroll, paying all of our bills, and, doing all of those kind of important tasks in our office, and she has to spend an hour and a half of her day making sure our front desk is getting their breaks that they deserve when somebody else is on vacation. So having an additional front desk person would help alleviate stress on my administrative supervisor. It would also allow us to be more efficient in the office. When there are 2 people up there and the phone's ringing and we're missing phone calls because there's only 2 people up there and the phone's ringing and we can't keep up with the phone there at times. So the person could also potentially be doing some data entry for probation staff. So it would be very beneficial to be able to have another person to be helping out at our front desk. So those are my total of 3 requests: the PREA coordinator, additional probation officer, and then the administrative assistant.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Farney?
The administrative assistant would not be reimbursable?
Correct. Yeah, that would be an AFSCME position.
Any other questions? Thanks, Shannon.
I've got one specialty fund
We'll
here.
look into that then.
Okay. Okay, so this is our probation services fund. And this is an account that we use. So this is from probation fees that clients pay. So as you've heard from Susan and Judge Rosenbaum, monies coming into this account have decreased since the passage of different acts and legislature things that have happened. So this fund, clients get put on probation, they get assessed a monthly fee for being on probation. So AOIC and the Supreme Court dictate how we can spend the money in this fund. They have just put out new probation fee standards that I put on the slides, were effective in February, where we have to spend money in this fund. It has to be split between what they consider client services and operating expenses, 70-30. So what do we use this fund for? Typically, you'll see in that first line, we're using it for cognitive treatment groups and supplies, GPS monitoring. All of our interpreter services get paid out of this fund. I pay for a lot of clients to go to partner abuse intervention program classes out of this fund. This fund also helps contribute to drug court expenses. So the majority of the funds, the majority of the money in this account needs to be spent on stuff to help the clients. We will buy people bus tickets, train tickets. We're starting up several new groups in our office. We have a new partner abuse intervention program group that we're actually starting in our office, and we're paying Cognition Works to come and do the group in our office. We are using something called the CARRY guides, which are an evidence-based item to kind of do homework with clients. So we're actually going to be giving people homework, cognitive behavioral homework. It pays for all of our MRT groups, the moral recognition therapy. So what we have to be doing with this fund is 70% of the expenses have to be what AOIC considers client services, and only 30% can be operating expenses. So that has affected, like, kind of like what Susan was mentioning about some of the smaller counties. For example, some of the smaller counties in our circuit do not get any money from their county boards, and they have been paying for everything in their probation departments through this account. And AOIC is now saying, no, you cannot do that. It has to be the split. So they're having to go to their county boards and ask them for funds that they've never given them to try to help them get to this 70-30. I'm not worried about where we're at on the 70-30. We're already meeting that quota. Like, we are already at a point where we're spending at least 70% of the funds, and that and 70% of the funds we're spending are spent towards client services. So we are in good shape on that, but we cannot use any money on cars. So the account up there says 051 and 052. So it's put together on this slide, but they actually are two separate accounts. The money that comes into 051 is only about $37,000 a year, but the money that comes into 052 is a lot more money. We cannot use any of the 052 money on cars, computers, any kind of what they consider equipment. We can use some money from 051, but again, that fund has a much smaller balance and gets a much smaller amount of money. And nothing for JDC can be spent out of 618052. That is only for, because the juvenile clients are not paying into that account, so it can't be used to fund things at the detention center either. So they are very strict about what we can use to spend out of that account on client services. I know it has a high balance, and I will also let you know that if AOIC ever says to us that they can't do the full funding for us, when, you know, if the state budget things happen and they come back next year and they say, well, we can't fully fund you guys anymore, we can use money from this account to back up the county on paying for the salaries. So that's another reason we don't want to just run this money all out, because if we get to that position, we want to have money in place to be able to cover the salaries to where the county doesn't have to make that up. So, questions?
Looks like we're all questioned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next up, Public Defender Liz Pollock, straight from trial.
And going back there. All right, so I have a general fund budget. There it is. We're fully staffed. 25 of 25 positions are filled. 5 of the positions are currently paid for by grants, which we'll talk about later. I didn't make a lot of requests. I didn't ask for any increases in any of my line items because I was told that you guys didn't have any money. So I'm trying to be very cautious about what I ask for. One of the things I could have asked for, but I didn't, was the beautiful new space that we have in the jury assembly room, which is housing 4 new offices, is cubicles that don't reach the ceiling. So you can hear everybody whispering in the cubicle next to you. We currently are handling the situation with multiple Amazon purchased noise machines that are parked outside of their doors, but it is not stopping people from being able to hear each other. So I would have loved to ask for some real walls at some point, but I didn't. One thing that we absolutely do need to talk about is expert money. I'd like to tell you all that we can wait until the ICEJA grant is decided upon, because we did apply for it, me with the help of Kate Kuzio, who is the best decision you guys have ever made, by the way. She helped me apply for it for $100,000. We have had over the last 3 years through ARPA funding a total of $85,000 in different increments that we've used to spend on experts. We are out. There is no more ARPA money. So what I could do is I could ask the court to pay for it, but they don't have any money. So I figure what I'll be doing is just sending you guys budget amendments, because we have cases where we absolutely need expert witnesses. I have 3 outstanding bills right now that are unpaid that are going to have to come from somewhere. And the ABA, the NACDL, pretty much every law organization in the world agrees that in order to adequately represent people on the defense side of things, you need to use experts. And we have $0. We have never had dollars in that fund ever. So I would love to tell you that I'm going to get that grant. And if I do, I'll withdraw this request. But in the meantime, if we don't get the grant, then we need to talk about how we're going to be able to fulfill our constitutional mandate to adequately represent our clients. I do have a request for one new position, entry level. I don't have any more room for anybody anyway, so I can't ask for more than that, even though the guidelines say I should have 27 attorneys, 10 investigators, and 6 social workers, which of course everybody knows I do not have. But this position, I feel, would allow us to really kind of even out a little bit on our caseload numbers. Right now, I don't know how they did it before when we had 9 people. I really don't understand how anybody survived, because even now with the full staff, which is 17 attorneys, we still struggle to find coverage for arraignment court and detention hearings because everybody is in their courtrooms doing their caseloads. And so the number of emails that fly around every single day, which is like, I got set for a plea, can you cover for me? I have to go to this, my trial's going longer than I thought, can you cover for me? And sometimes there is literally nobody to do it. And so we have to run multiple people in that courtroom. So somebody does the first half, somebody helps with intake, somebody covers one detention hearing and then leaves, and then somebody else comes in and covers the next detention hearing. It's crazy town. And I don't know how they did it before, but even with the full staff that we have, we are still struggling to get coverage for that. And I happen to have a blossoming law student who worked for us this past summer, who is going to graduate from SIU in May. And she wants to work for us. And she is, for whatever reason that I cannot comprehend, in love with arraignment court. And she would volunteer to basically be a partially designated arraignment court and detention hearing attorney for us and take the load off of everybody else in those courtrooms. But as it stands right now, I don't have a line item and I don't have a position for her. So I would love to be able to add her. I did originally have a request for an extra $20,000 to increase some of our salaries. I took that out because, again, y'all are broke and I'm trying not to ask for stuff I don't need. And we have finagled a way to pay for what I want out of grant money. And so we are not going to be asking for that increase at this time. The other thing that you guys don't pay for, because we have grants, are 2 social workers, our drug court attorney, another attorney, a paralegal. All of my training that my attorneys do comes from grants. Our Westlaw subscription comes from grants. And we were able to stock up and deal with all of our equipment from grants. So the county didn't have to pay for any of that. Any questions?
Ms. Lakshan?
I don't know if this is strictly budget related, but I guess I'm curious, what would you say is the average total of grant funded budget in your office per year?
Of what I pay for with grants?
Yeah.
Probably about 300 grand.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Pollock? Ms. Banachir?
So when you getting more grants?
I'm working on it, bro. I'm trying. I subscribed to a grants website, even with Kate being here, and I scour them, and I've applied for multiple additional grants that I have not gotten. So I applied for a grant for transportation assistance for our clients. I got denied. I applied for a grant to help pay for clothing and hotel temporary housing for our homeless clients while they deal with their cases to get reestablished. I used some grant money that I had to help a guy stay in a hotel for 2 weeks so he could delouse, so that we could get him an ID because he couldn't go to the DMV until he was cleared medically. And so we got that taken care of, but our clients have a lot of needs and not a lot of resources. So I'm trying.
Ms. Rogers?
I try not to knock over my coffee this time. The new attorney position, will they have a caseload, or is the sole purpose going to be for like arraignment court and bond court?
They will not have a caseload. It will be arraignment court. It will be coverage for detention hearings and conflict coverage. So I don't know if any of you guys know this, but the public defender's office is a unique animal in the state. Most attorneys, if they have a conflict of interest because there's co-defendants or because for whatever reason, either the private attorney is allowed to quit and they can't take the co-defendant because it's unethical. Those ethics don't apply to us. We have been told you can't quit ever. And you also can take multiple conflict cases. So what we do is if we have co-defendant cases, 2 different attorneys in my office represent those people. I am currently the conflict attorney for juvenile delinquency because we don't have another person to do that. And I would like to be able to put somebody into a conflict position. We do have somebody that's going to be helping out with that because now our new traffic attorney has started. And so I'm going to be able to cover some of those conflicts. But there are still too many cases in too many places and not enough people to do them. So there would be I would say a handful of actual cases for that person, but their primary focus would be arraignment court.
Mr. Varney.
On the expert witness money, just because I don't understand, I haven't been involved in legal proceedings. So,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Knock on wood, other than paying some traffic tickets when I was young and dumb. So let's say you defend someone and they ultimately are convicted, and would the lack of expert witnesses be a basis for them to appeal? Or, what's like the consequences that come back to us, just so we understand?
Sure. Well,
other than perhaps somebody unjustly being convicted or something like that.
Well, that's a big one for me.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I don't really believe anybody should be unjustly convicted, but what it can result in is ineffective assistance of counsel petitions. And so that doesn't really monetarily impact the board yet. What it does is create a crap ton more work for the state's attorney's office and for us, because when a client alleges that an attorney is ineffective, that petition, there's a 3-stage process. Stage 1, the judge looks at it and says, is there a hint of ineffectiveness that is alleged here? If they think that there's a whiff of it, it moves forward to a 2nd stage. That's when counsel is appointed. I have a contract right now with a private attorney who handles what I would call the bigger post-convictions, like that are from trials, because we don't have time. But I handle the rest, unless I can't, because if I am the direct supervisor of somebody who is in the office, then they're the person who's being alleged to be ineffective, then I can't take it because I have a conflict, so then I have to give it to somebody else in my office. The state's attorney's office handles these all the time, and it's an entire caseload of people that have to deal with that. So the potential monetary impact to the board would not come from an ineffective assistance of counsel petition unless there was a lawsuit alleging that the gross failure of the county to provide effective assistance and requested monetary damages. And if those were to be granted at any point, that would be a financial impact to the board. But really what it is right now is just, it's really killer on us.
Ms. Pollitt, can you tell us how much have you spent on expert witnesses this year, and like what decision goes into when you hire one, when you don't?
Sure. Well, I mean, we had this kind of rolling fund. So we have spent over the last 3 years, $85,000. I have to, when you're looking at a case, there's a bunch of different ways experts can be used. We use a lot of them in psychological cases because the county, if you think as an attorney that your client is unfit, meaning that they are suffering from a mental illness and they cannot understand the court proceedings, or if you think that a mental illness interfered with their ability to appreciate the criminality of their actions, the court has 2 doctors that they pay to do those evaluations for us. But there are a myriad of conditions between perfectly sane and so nuts you don't know what you're doing that are what we call mitigating, that explain why somebody did something, or maybe tell a judge, you don't need to do 20 years in prison, 8 is enough, or you don't need to do any prison, probation is enough, and if we get the person the appropriate treatment. So it is a mitigating thing where it helps us investigate and show the court, the world, the state, everyone, that our client has an alternative to IDOC. So that's one example. And those psychological evaluations sometimes, even if they don't rise to a level of NGRI or not guilty by reason of insanity, can still gravely impact the outcome of a proceeding. And then you have things like forensics, which we really don't do because we don't have the money for that. So as an example, I just conducted a murder trial where there was an issue about the angle of a firearm being shot. You need a crime scene reconstruction ballistics expert in order to show that. And so we were able to fund that person. But every case, especially now with cell phones, for example, like we can't analyze a cell phone extraction. We can't look for exculpatory evidence in a cell phone extraction, or if our client has a phone and they say, hey, look at my phone, I'm like, I can't because I don't have an expert. DNA is an area where it would be helpful to sometimes be able to explain, you know, how transfer DNA works, or how their DNA percentages with the likelihood ratio can be challenged. There's all these areas of forensic challenge that we as a county just simply don't do. I did them when I was in the feds because they did have money for that, but we haven't been able to do it. And there's a lot of areas like fingerprint analysis. You think it's just official because it comes from a state lab. But there are subjective things that go into that analysis that sometimes maybe the examiner didn't take into account, or maybe there's a bias there, and maybe a different examiner would come to a different conclusion, and we simply don't have the ability to investigate that.
Any other further questions for Ms. Pollack? I think we're good.
Okay. This is my automation fund, which we've never used. Thank you to the budget people for telling me what was in it because I didn't know. This is supposed to be used to keep our automated record keeping systems up to date, and we have not used it. So there it is. This is my public defender grant fund. This is going to be slightly increased this year. There's $10 million allocated statewide to all public defender offices, and I am getting approximately $193,000 of that this year. I do share a little bit of it with the circuit court to help reimburse for costs for attorneys when we can't take cases because there are more than 2 defendants, and we have a lot of interpreter costs and things like that that helps supplement. This pays for one of my attorneys, my paralegal, my legal research, and all of our training. The reason why the budget numbers look like that is because the state is the fiscal year July 1 to June 30, and we are fiscal year January 1 to December 31, so they never line up. So I didn't even know it was going to be on there. So thank you, Travis and company, because this is always really difficult to calculate. And this is my last one. This is our grant for our 2 mitigation specialists. You'll see there again, there's negative for FY26. That's because of the fiscal year turnover. So I pay my mitigation specialists the salary, benefits, and training, and OSPS gives us money for that. I think that's all I got. Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Pollack.
Thank you.
Next up, State's Attorney's Office.
Hello. Wow. You want to know how many grants I have? 0. You want to know why? Because there are none available for prosecutors. Sorry. Well. Okay. It is 7:45. I am in the middle of dealing with 2 murders. So I'm going to talk fast, I think. I don't even know what this says. Why did this start here?
We usually start with the general fund. I can go to one of your special revenue funds if you want to start there.
I don't even know.
That is out.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Sorry, that was a long night. So the state's attorney's office, I have 21 attorneys. 3 of those are dedicated to helping you and your myriad of issues on the civil side. And they've been very busy. Thanks very much. So that would put me down to, including myself, 18. And then I have 2 attorneys who are funded by the state who do child support enforcement entirely. So that puts me down to 16 funded by you all. And the public defender has 17. So I'm going to say that's a little lopsided, quite frankly. She has a lot of grants, apparently, that I do not have. And my criminal attorneys handle everything from petty traffic tickets that she does not handle. I'm going to stop saying she. I'm going to say that the public defender's office doesn't handle. And all of the private attorney cases that are not handled by the public defender's office. We also handle cases from the very beginning, from the investigative stage, getting search warrants in the middle of the night, something the Public Defender's Office does not do and my attorneys are not compensated for in addition to their normal salary. We advise police agencies on what they're doing and how they're doing it. We take calls from police agencies throughout the night. I have an on-call attorney who that rotates every week. So every week there's one attorney who is assigned to be the on-call attorney and take calls in the middle of the night. They are not compensated extra for that. And we are now the only department that has to work on the weekend because we are responsible for reviewing police reports for arrests that occur over the weekend when people are in custody and make decisions about whether or not we're going to ask to hold them over until Monday for court. It used to be that the Public Defender's Office appeared for bond court and the judge appeared in person. That is no longer the case. It is only my attorneys who have to come in, pull police reports, review the police reports, review criminal history, make decisions about whether or not somebody's going to stay in jail or be released over the weekend. The public defender has no role in that anymore, and the judges can call in. They don't even have to show up. No offense, Judge Rosenbaum. And we are not compensated extra for that. I'm sorry if I'm being blunt, but my attorneys work very, very hard, and they do not get anything extra for all of the extra things that they do. When we have multiple defendants in a case, one attorney handles all of those defendants. We cannot divide defendants out to various different people or to private counsel or outside counsel. We are responsible for victims of crime, and we have statutory obligations for those victims of crime when it comes to notification and advising them of what is going on and meeting with them and getting their opinions and making sure they have available resources for them. We are responsible for assisting the Children's Advocacy Center with interviews of child victims, and going over and reviewing and being a part of those interviews. We have a wide variety of responsibilities, again, on top of the other things that we do for you all that can involve being here at your board meetings, helping to do contract negotiations, dealing with all kinds of issues across the board that you all know about that are going on currently. And then I have child support again, who assist child support individuals, families who are either required to pay child support or receiving child support, and making sure that those orders are entered and that people are getting the support that they need and paying what they need to care for their children. We also handle involuntary commitments, which is when somebody has a mental health issue and law enforcement or the hospital or a family is seeking them to be taken to a hospital and held for mental health treatment. And that is something, again, the Public Defender's Office has zero role in. It is entirely us and our responsibility. We are not compensated in any way, shape, or form by hospitals for that work. And I have, I think I have one grant I think we'll talk about, which funds part of a victim advocate. So what am I trying to do? This first slide talks about a court diversion program that I'm trying to, that I'm looking at purchasing, basically. It's called Advent e-learning. Right now we have a diversion program that is run by my misdemeanor attorney and court services, where basically if somebody is charged with a lower level misdemeanor, we try to give them an opportunity to stay out of trouble for a few months, maybe do some public service work, pay some restitution if that's something. And if they do everything they're supposed to do, then the case gets dismissed. There is no funding for that. That is entirely my design. There is a company called Advent eLearning that we have met with that basically takes this on. I'm hoping that it will allow us to provide misdemeanor diversion to a wider range of individuals, of defendants, and but to increase what we're doing would be very difficult without any assistance or funding. I believe that this costs $500 per month, and so we are asking that we get a budget increase of $6,000 a year to pay for this diversion program. There's no state funding available for that, so no grants for that. The next one, we're asking for a dedicated receptionist position. So this is a little complicated, but I have had a receptionist in the past. My office gets a whole lot of phone calls from a wide variety of people, victims, witnesses, attorneys, sometimes defendants who don't know who else to call, family members, members of the public. So we have, and then people who come up to the window, and sometimes people are sent up to us by the circuit clerk's office because they don't know who else to send them to. Victims show up, all kinds of people show up at the front desk. And so we have had a receptionist in the past, and then at that time, we changed that to increase our secretary pool, and we were rotating them to the front desk. That wasn't a good plan. And so when my paralegal, Janelle, retired after 40 years, I think, with the county, you might remember, we sat down and decided, what do we need? And we decided to refund the receptionist position from Janelle's salary that was left behind, basically, and to give up the paralegal position and see how that went. So we did that, and that has worked out very well as far as having the receptionist back. However, we didn't have the paralegal, and there are no, this will be a continuing theme with me, there are no grants for that. So I don't have grants for 2 paralegal positions from the state or whoever else is funding the public defender's office, now 2 paralegals, and I have 0 paralegals and partial funding available for that role. And I have been short 4 attorneys for the past 6 or 8 months or so. And so we decided that we wanted to fund the paralegal position. And happily, here's happy news, happily, I have recently hired 4 new attorneys. They are not attorneys yet. They are new graduates who just took the bar and are waiting their bar results. And so we'll see, we'll hope, everyone pray for them, that they become attorneys, but until November, they will not actually be attorneys. I will tell you also that some of them have immigration issues, and so we are going to have to sponsor them so that they can get their work visas, and that is going to cost some money as well that we don't have a line item for, and I might be specifying a request for that as well. But they are very smart young people, and they are willing to work for me for relatively low pay compared to what they might be able to get someplace else because I'm willing to sponsor them. That's just being honest. So, so we are still seeking the support of a paralegal and the receptionist position. And so to make sure that we can fund the 4 attorneys that we're able to get and the receptionist and the paralegal, we are asking to fully fund the receptionist position. And then we'd be able to make sure that we could fully fund the paralegal position as well as the 4 attorneys. So that is the explanation there. Anytime anybody wants to interrupt with a question, since I'm throwing a whole lot of stuff at you, feel free to stop me.
Mr. Farney?
The paralegal position, so we've got this packet of requests None of your positions are in those requests. Are you needing us to create these positions because you already have budget room for them, or would this be additional budget that you need to fill these positions?
This would be additional budget. The positions themselves already exist.
Okay. So, but we haven't been funding them for you yet.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Sort of. I mean, I have funding because, like I said, Janelle retired, and so I took her money and divided it up, basically. So I have to sit down, frankly, and look at my entire salary schedule now that I've hired 4 people, and their salaries are different from the people who left. And the people who left, frankly, left to go to DCFS, where they won't make more money and can work from home. Or they're people like Mr. Seller.
Can I ask one other question?
Go ahead, Mr. Fry.
Just so that we understand both sides of the coin on expert witnesses, does your budget currently allow for you to pay for expert witnesses? Is that, you had like $93,000 in professional services, it looked like. Is that where that would be coming from already? Are you already able to do that, or do we need to?
Well, okay, so professional services is kind of a hodgepodge, where frankly I haven't really. That's kind of where we pay for all kinds of stuff. So, so yes, but that's not entirely expert witnesses.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
It does. Absolutely.
So like I have to pay for expert witnesses. So anytime that we have Dr. Bao come to testify in a murder case where he did the autopsy, because he's no longer here, we have to pay for his travel and his time and his, all that. It's usually about $5,000 a pop for him, just him. So anytime the public defender gets an expert witness, we might try to counter with our own expert witness. And there's a wide variety of what expert witnesses cover.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions at this point?
Okay, so this slide has to do with my recently hired 4 additional attorneys. We're trying to accommodate everybody with some updated modern office furniture. Some of our office furniture is original to the building 20 years ago, and it really needs replacement. So we are asking for some funding for the replacement for that, desks, shelving units, that sort of thing. And so we did, frankly, some of our desks are falling apart and just need replaced. So that's what that request is, for a little money to make things a little bit more modern and comfortable. Okay, this is I have given you this speech before, and I'll just give it again shortly for the people who are new. This is a series of slides about salaries for attorneys. So basically, last year I did this and I asked for you all to consider moving the attorneys, and both my attorneys and the public defender's attorneys, because I'm generous that way and I think we should all be compensated appropriately. From their currently in the salary schedule, attorneys are kind of on their own line. They're not a grade, it's just attorneys. And there's this minimum, midpoint, maximum. So the minimum is 56,639 or something like that. Neither of us are starting people at that because we can't get people to start at that. So the 4 new attorneys, graduates who aren't attorneys yet, I hired at 60,000, and when they become attorneys, I've told them that they will get a raise to 65,000. And the attorneys in the room can vouch for me that nobody's getting paid $56,000. And so grade K, which is a grade, starts at 63,000, And grade L, which is for me, lead prosecutors, and for the public defender, the first assistant, is a minimum 71,723. So that grade L is the only attorney grade. Otherwise, it's just this general attorney grade, and it's comparable to what we have as grade J. Next slide, please. And so last year I looked at the education requirements for these different grades, and I looked at grades J and K. And the educational requirements for grades J and K are outlined on this slide. So, and this is across the county. So for all the different county positions, what's the educational requirement for grades J and grades K? So only, so 13 of them only require a bachelor's degree and 2 to 5 years of experience. And only one of them in grade K requires a postgraduate degree, and 8 of them only require a bachelor's degree, 3 of them only require associates, 4 of them only require high school plus experience, and 6 of them only require high school. Attorneys require a JD, postgraduate law degree. So there's a whole lot of positions in the county in a higher grade than the attorneys, meaning a higher starting salary than attorneys, that have a much lower educational requirement than attorneys require. That seems inequitable to me. And so I looked again at outside issues. It's still an employee market that hasn't changed. We're still competing for the same candidate pool. The only way generally that prosecutors can make more money, because we don't have a whole lot of flexibility in our salary schedules, is to move from office to office. And my fellow elected states attorneys are constantly changing their salary schedules. And I know people across the state who are starting new prosecutors at $80,000, $85,000. They're paying what they have to pay. Their county boards are giving them more money in order to get prosecutors, because it's very difficult to find people these days. So I've had people leave and go to other prosecutors' offices. I had one guy leave who was making 85, went to Vermilion County to make 100,000. I can't compete with that. And I told you also last year, Sangamon County did a 2022 salary review. They created some different levels. They increased their pay schedule, and it was a significant increase from that for them. And that's just some information about what they did. And then some information about salary schedules and comparative salaries for federal government assistant U.S. attorneys, although who would want to work for the federal government right now? Anyway, but they have a much better starting salary, much better benefits, much better 401k with a matching, all kinds of things. The city attorneys, assistant city attorney in Champaign starts at about $100,000 a year. And local private firms are all starting higher than we are able to start. And that's that. So I am always going to come and ask that the salary schedule for attorneys be increased, because it is inequitable. It makes it very difficult to hire appropriately, and I don't have any grant possibilities in order to get prosecutors. That just doesn't exist. Any questions?
Mr. Farney.
This is actually probably a question better for Michelle or Travis. I was just looking on the website. At one time, we had a list that showed all of the positions, the non-bargaining positions, and what grades they were in. And I can't find it on the website. I think that would be helpful for us to see what every position and what the grades are. So if it's something that's readily available, if you could shoot that to the board, I think that would be helpful.
It is, but it's really hidden in the website. You have to go to a whole bunch of different places in order to get to it.
Any further questions? I think we're ready to move on to some special fun.
I don't have very many. There's not much to tell you other than that we have support enforcement. Again, that is a contract with the Department of Healthcare and Family Services. Basically, we provide representation in child support and paternity cases. That is a contract. It used to cover a whole lot of other things. It used to be funded enough that we could pay the county back rent. That is no longer the case. It basically now covers strictly personnel, and commodities and all kinds of other things, frankly, are paid for out of our general fund budget. And if, let's say, for example, there's some required increase because of a contractual issue involving, let's say a department that wants to reclassify its AFSCME staff. I have 3 AFSCME staff in the Support Enforcement Division, and the contract will not cover a significant increase for them. So that would have to come out of General Corporate Fund also. There are many counties that have given up their support enforcement contract and let the Attorney General's office cover it. I don't want to do that. I think it's an important area for us to cover locally, and so I'm working very hard to keep that as a viable part of the office. Drug Asset Forfeiture Fund. This is the one thing that I have that nobody else has. So drug asset forfeitures, when law enforcement seizes vehicles or money that is recovered in drug investigations, then we do the work to do all of the paperwork and the court filings and hearings if necessary to allow those assets to be forfeited to the state. We receive 12% of those assets. So if it's money or if it's a car that gets sold, we get 12% of that, and that goes into our drug asset forfeiture fund. And there are limitations as to what we can spend that on. But it goes towards training, and we can't use it towards personnel, but we can use it towards supplies and training and other such things to combat the sale and the proliferation of illegal drugs in the community. So basically, we appropriate some money every year to use for those purposes.
Any questions on the drug asset forfeiture? I have one, and it's really just a functional question. I remember last year you telling us that you used some of this money for standing desks.
Yes.
Okay. So if you buy desks for people with this money for the drug enforcement attorneys, the old desks, can they make their way down the line to your newly hired employees?
They're 20 years old, the old desks.
Okay, so the money was used from this fund 20 years ago to buy the desks. Standing desks is what I'm asking. Like, I remember you telling us last year.
Yeah, last year I bought some standing desks for people, and we used funds from this fund. So, I mean, no, they're the kind that go whoosh. If you go to Seating and More, Andrew will make us a really good deal.
I guess my question was if anybody, but since you bought these last year, there's no need for the drug people to get new desks this year, I mean, for it to move down the line or anything.
If we have to use money from this fund, we can use money from this fund for those purposes. So.
Any other questions regarding drug asset forfeiture? Ms. Lakshan?
I was going to ask the same thing. So it is, we're fixated on desks, I'm sorry. But the desks would have to be specifically for, say, attorneys who are working in drug cases and not necessarily new attorneys who are just hired is what we're
Let's say that's sure. Yes, that's what the rule is supposed to be. Yes, technically. And that's a very, variable fund as far as how much we have in it. It really depends on the work that law enforcement has done. And over the years, laws have changed and restricted our ability to seize property, understandably.
It may be good news to you because you've been so busy doing your job and the 47,000 things you do for us every day that are very appreciated. But in our budget book here, it says that so far in financial year 2025, the state's attorney has filed or assisted in 31 forfeiture actions and the various things. Anyway, it all comes, when all is said and done, to $200,844.21 and $48,789. So if you get 12.5% of that, that's $31,204, and it's budgeted at 25. So it's already more for this year.
Right.
But and we're not done with the year yet. So there is some more coming this year.
Yeah, no, we work very hard at that. I do have one attorney, well, in addition to other things, that is his responsibility, and then a secretary in addition to other things who does all the paperwork for that. It certainly doesn't pay for them. And, the vast majority of that money goes to the arresting agency as well as the Illinois State Police. And so it's one of our responsibilities to do that. Other than the 12%, we don't get any support from the law enforcement community to do that. They don't pay us to do that work, but we do it. And it's, ideally to be used for training and all of that sort of thing. So. And similarly to what Ms. Pollock told you, I have an automation fund also similar. It's just a little tiny amount. We do try to use that to counter some expenses for IT when it comes to computer technology and that sort of thing. But we keep it low because, again, the fund balance is pretty low. Anything else?
Are there any other questions for Ms. Reitz while we have her here? Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Travis, you're up.
The final one of the night is the opioid fund. Kate unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. She would have been able to talk about the more fun stuff of this fund. I'll just talk about the numbers. I alluded to it yesterday, or I guess last night. This used to be housed in the general fund, and we recently created a separate fund for it because it can only be spent on certain items. It's the settlement funds for the different entities that had opioid issues, and we use that to help the community with opioid problems. There's a large variety of things that we can use it for, but it's all opioid related. So recently we got a nice estimate over the years of what we're expecting to get year by year. So it kind of helped us so we could kind of plan on what we want to do. For the first couple of years, it was just going in the general fund and not really being spent because we didn't know how much we would actually get. Kate has been working on some contracts and ways to spend the money. I can't really talk really good about those because I don't, other than the one with CUPHD, which was a small one, but she's recently signed a big contract, and Jen probably would be able to explain that one a little bit more.
I'll actually hop in. We've all voted on all of the big ones that are outstanding. At this point, there's no outstanding, but as requests come in, they get vetted and they go before the opioid task force. I will say that unlike any of the other things we've heard about today, where we want to maintain fund balance, these are compensation for a harm. So our goal is to get these funds out into the community to remedy the harm because they're damages. This is damages, not something we want to keep going. But to speak to Travis's point that it's more than expected, we had gotten a lump sum originally of about $500,000, and we were told about $90,000 a year for the next 15 years. And if you look at what our revenue is expected to be in the 2026 budget, we're getting more than 90. So we can explore other areas. We've looked at, could we fund a probation officer? Ms. Siders has said that she doesn't have enough opioid impacted clients to justify that, but we're looking at all different ways that we can help solve county problems, budgetary problems, while using these funds, because it's a nice chunk of change. Yes, Ms. Rodriguez.
I also just want to add, look at the amount here. Like, if there's not an incentive to wrap your programs around this need, I don't know what is. I know a lot of the organizations that we talk to, or that I talk to, they're not aware that this money exists, and B, that there's a possibility that they could reach that need and be funded for doing so. So anybody you talk to who, I don't know, owns a nonprofit, etc., please encourage them to look into this, grow their services to meet these needs.
The one thing is that we have to have it very specifically tailored to opioid impacted individuals. There's one organization we've been working with that wants to do a resource center. I'm like, but how do we guarantee it's just there? So it's very specific if you're reaching out to your community groups. Ms. Lakshan.
Okay, that's a really depressing number also, but so then it wouldn't be usable for something like the software program that Ms. Reitz was talking about, because that handles addiction, but also X, Y, and Z. Okay, got it.
Every quarter, Kate and I have to do a quarterly report and basically justify every single transaction that has been spent in the quarter and link it to, it's like A through AK, and then a subcategory, and then another subcategory. So every dollar spent gets recorded how it was spent.
Emily?
So an example of this, and I know everybody wants to go home, but See You at Home, built on extra beds specifically for people dealing with any kind of addiction-related problems or for opioid-related issues. Could be relation to a family member, etc. But any case member that touches that issue is reserved one of those beds. So it's just one example of growing in that area to meet those needs. You're not cramming in and trying to, cheat the system or anything like that, but you can literally grow your services to meet those needs. I guess that's the point that I want to make. See You at Home is a great example of that.
If there's any other questions about opioid, Travis.
I have one last thing just to reiterate. This used to be in the general fund. It got moved out last year or two, and that was one of the reasons the fund balance in the general fund dropped. So it's its own fund, but just to let you know, that's a reason the general fund dropped.
Did we have to move it?
For tracking purposes, since it has to be spent specific, yes.
Thank you. All right, with that, it is 8:22. I call this meeting adjourned. We'll see y'all tomorrow at 6 p.m.